Okay, sorry about that, y'all. My computer shut down at suddenly right before I was able to get started, so I had to reboot everything. Anyhow, we're back, and sorry, let me turn that off. So, what we did is recorded this interview. That way I can play it over and over if need be. My voice will be a little bit softer on this, but you will hear Cody's voice come in really loud and clear now. So there is no excuses for this not to work. Now, if y'all are hearing it and you hear it start to wash out certain words or names or dates, that is totally beyond my control. Like I want to say, I'm going to put my disclaimer out. I have no firsthand knowledge of anything. I cannot confirm or deny anything that Cody's going to tell you, but this is something that he feels that he wants to get out, so I'm giving him the platform. By all means, you need to subscribe to the channel, hit that little bell thing so you can get the notifications, and pound the like button. And the most critical thing you can do is share this with everybody, because it's not going to be heard on the mainstream media. It's not going to get out anywhere unless you force it to get out. So that's the thing that we're doing, is we're forcing the information out there so that it will have to be picked up sooner or later. And I can tell you already, I can't go into a lot of detail on stuff, but we have been having several conversations. I already have another show already pre-recorded, ready to go, but we're going to do these in kind of an order so you can start putting the timeline together, and it will start piecing everything together slowly but surely, and that way you'll start hearing how all the dots are connected. So without further ado, let me go ahead and start the show, and then y'all just kick back and relax and enjoy the show. Hang on. Okay, hello tubers. Welcome to Snafu Radio. If you like this content on this channel, please share, give it a thumbs up, and by all means, pass it around to everybody you know. Now, I know that I had this interview with Cody yesterday, and a lot of y'all were talking about how the transmission that came across was just total crap. There was no interference with his cell phone to mine when I was cutting that live stream. It was completely through YouTube. It was being manipulated. There was nothing I could do, especially when he started getting into some really good information. Now, I'll say this again. I cannot confirm, I cannot deny, and I have no firsthand knowledge of anything this man is going to tell you. But let's just say, if it walks like a duck, quacks like a duck, it might be a duck. So with that, I want to bring in Cody. Cody, how are you doing tonight?
Doing good, Scott.
Well, good. Well, yesterday we had some really good information that unfortunately a lot of people weren't able to get a lot of clarification on. So tonight we're just going to kind of go back over some of this stuff. And this is going to be a recorded call. This is not going to be live streamed. That way it can't get messed up, hopefully. And if it does, I'll have the recording and I can be able to play it again until they finally quit jacking with us. That may be a while.
Yeah, that's great. That's the best way to do it, because anytime you get into sensitive stuff, they, you know how they do.
Oh, yeah. And, let's just clarify a couple of things for people. That obviously there's not going to be a whole lot of hard factual evidence, because any good operator is going to sanitize a scene Could you elaborate on that, maybe to clarify that for people?
Yeah, in any kind of black op, it doesn't matter what kind of intelligence agency you're working for, like the CIA or the Israeli Mossad. I trained with Israeli Mossad agents over in Tokyo, Japan, briefly in some high-level martial arts stuff over there. But, you know, there's MI6, there's all the different ones, KGB, FSB. It's standard procedure in a black op that you have to control blowback. And blowback is anything surfacing out, you know, into the world. And so, you know, if there's any pictures, they got to be lost. If there's any fingerprints, they got to disappear. There can't be any DNA samples. There can't be any ELINT or SIGINT. ELINT is electronic intelligence, or SIGINT is signal intelligence. And so a true black op stays black forever. The only ones that know about it are the operators themselves and their higher-ups or principals. But, you know, standard procedure is to sanitize all scenes. And then if there is any blowback, things surface back to the press or whatever, then they have a lot of different ways to minimize the blowback. You know, one of them is by murdering witnesses. Another one is by planting evidence and then getting them thrown into jail and discrediting their testimony. It goes on and on. There's blackmail, all kinds of ways to make sure that the blowback is minimized. And so that's what, you know, I know people that were in the Inspector General's office at the CIA, they're personal friends that might have been here in my house and stuff. Can't name them now, but they are not active. They're retired. But you know, the IG's office, the Inspector General's office, they would be charged with any kind of blowback that came back from field operations. They would just you know, they were making sure the legal aspects were covered, like CIA didn't get caught, and there was lawsuits or wrongful death suits or anything like that. But like I told them, I said, you guys in the IG's office, all you do is see the after action reports after they've been passed up the chain of command to the station chief, and then they're always doctored. The after action reports do not reflect what really happened out in the field, because none of those people were there. You know, we were there. You know, we had the black mask and the double plastic gloves and Nomex to cover the plastic. Nomex is that heat-resistant stuff that, you know, our silencers, machine guns would get hot. And so anyway, all the stuff that was done in the field, and then the field reports are filed, and then it goes all up to the after action, and then it goes to the IG's office. It's censored so many times by the time it actually gets up there that the data is all politicized. And so what really happened out in the field is very rarely even known to a lot of the CIA personnel that work with the data. So blowback is the big thing, and a black op has to stay black, and there's a lot of ways to cover it. If something gets out, then they can do misinformation, and they can start publishing stories to discredit the guys or plant false information to cover up some of the blowback that did occur out into the civilian press and stuff like that. So, yeah, you have to sanitize everything. That's the number one key, your principals, when they hire you, regardless of who you work for, is that they want the job done, whatever it is, and they don't want any problems. No, zero blowback, zero residual presence.
Well, that gets back into exactly what you're saying, to misinform or discredit and also throw misinformation out about that story in case it was to blow back. Then they start throwing out misinformation about it, convoluting it, making the story seem, they like to dub it conspiracy. Of course, conspiracy was a term coined by the CIA, ironically. So that's just part of it. But let's now that we kind of cleared that up for some people, let's kind of go back into a little bit about maybe how Bush was tied in with Mina and all that stuff about drugs being ran, the investigator out in L.A. What can you elaborate about that?
Yeah, before we go any further, I just want to make the standard statement. I'm going to say this every single time I talk. In 1982, they passed the Intelligence Identities Protection Act, the IIPA, U.S. Code Title 50, Sections 421 and 426, which states the disclosure of a U.S. government operative's identity is illegal only if it is done intentionally and with knowledge that the government is still actively maintaining a cover for such operative. So if I talk about anybody, most of them are going to be dead, and the ones that are alive, I'm not going to say any names, okay? So that way we're not illegal under any of this Title 50 stuff, and this is just one guy talking here, okay?
That's exactly how I want it to be.
So anyway, the interview last night, we were talking about how I was offered the job to bomb the Murrah building in October of '94, which I turned down on patriotic grounds. And before that, back in the '80s, I didn't talk about this last night, but I had left graduate school, working on a Master of Science degree at Stephen F. Austin State University in Nacogdoches, Texas. And I had got a job. I worked for Chevron Oil Company, and then I went up to Tulsa, Oklahoma at the Tulsa Data Center, and I was a petroleum geophysicist for Amoco. And that was my civilian front. In CI terms, they call it a NOC. It's a non-official cover operative. An official cover operative would be somebody like a liaison to the State Department or some kind of Secretary of State thing, and they have an official government cover, and really they're conducting operations. But I was an independent contractor, and so that was my civilian cover, and that was in the early 80s. And right around 80, 82, 83, 84, 85, the CI started running those operations over in Mena when Bill Clinton was governor. And Tulsa, where I was, it's right across the border. If you go east from Tulsa, it goes right into Arkansas. And so there was a whole lot of stuff going on. The Bowen Amendment had been passed by Congress, forbidding us to give military support to the Contras down in Nicaragua. And the Russians were supplying the Sandinistas. Daniel Ortega was leading that, with weapons and a lot of stuff. And so Reagan, they were fighting like a civil war down there. And Reagan didn't want that Nicaragua to fall, to communism. It's the old domino theory. And so he secretly ordered CI to arm and assist Contras. And so the operations were created. There were three of them in Arkansas. One was Jade Bridge, the other one was Screwworm, and the other one was Centaur Rose for the Rose Law Firm. And the Centaur Rose op was mostly just drugs, cocaine and stuff. And then the Jade Bridge, that was an op where they brought Nicaraguan guys up to Arkansas, and they were training them how to fly smaller aircraft like 172 Cessnas and stuff. And so they cut out little airstrips and stuff, and they would be training these pilots covertly and then sending them back down there. And then the Screwworm part of it was a part that was centered mostly out of Mexico City, and it was an op where they were actually manufacturing weapons. And so my stuff in that op, I was working with these Vietnam vets that had all been in Vietnam, and they were also, a couple of them had been working with CI over there. But my front was being a geophysicist, and it was a perfect cover. And so what we would do, one of the Vietnam vet's brothers, he worked at the National Guard Armory in Little Rock, Arkansas. And they would, that was back before all the computers, and they would steal ordnance, and then, fake the records and stuff. And it was a lot easier to control and track stuff with computers like they have now, but this was back in the 80s, and a lot of that was just ledgers, and 10 could turn into 1, they just erased the 0 kind of thing. So anyway, they were taking the weapons out of there, and my associate had a farm south of Little Rock, and they put the weapons there and cool them off for a while because there was always a CID investigation or something. And then we'd move those over to an associate in Oklahoma, between Oklahoma City and Tulsa. They had a farm with an airstrip there, and we would, hide the weapons and let them just sit there. And then whenever the orders came in, we would transform back over to the main airport, and then they were loaded on the C-123 transport plane that was owned by Barry Seal. Barry Seal been a pilot in Vietnam, and a lot of this stuff's old. A lot of it's in the internet. But to make a long story short, he would take weapons down there to follow, Reagan's orders to help the Congress. And Congress wasn't supposed to know about this because they passed the Bullet Amendment. So it was all secret black ops. And then they'd unload the stuff down there and then bring the planes back with the cocaine. And that was the Centaur Rose part where Bill and Hillary Clinton were directly involved. And they were, what I was told by my people, they asked me if I wanted to meet Bill Clinton one time, and I said, no, I don't want to be anywhere around those politicians, because Clinton had a meeting at that National Guard Armory where our associate was. And I said, it was at night, and I said, I was down there, but I said, I don't want to be around any of that. So anyway, make a long story short, what they told me was they were bringing about $100 million of cocaine in that operation a month, and that Clinton was getting 10% of the Black Ops money, which was $10 million a month. They were washing that money through ADFA, which is the Arkansas Development and Finance Association. Clinton had created to mold state and federal monies together and blend them, supposedly to help the people of Arkansas, and it was really just a big money laundering thing. And they sent the money to the Worthington Bank in Atlanta, and then from there it was washed through offshore accounts in the BCCI Bank in the Caymans. That's the Bank of Commerce and Credit International, okay? So they were doing this big thing, and they were washing the money. And the cocaine, some of it was being delivered in Tyson food trucks, the refrigerated food trucks. Some of my associates in New Zealand, they had the contract with the Tyson company they had a deep sea fishing outfit, and they would take their employees, for trips and so forth. And they came over to Arkansas, and they met Clinton and a lot of stuff. So I have a lot of people that were directly involved with all this. Some of them are still alive. I'm not going to say their names, but anyway, all this was going on. And Barry Seal was a pilot, contract pilot. He had started a thing called Rich Mountain Aviation in Mena, Arkansas. And he had several planes, and the C-123, which he nicknamed the Fat Lady. That was his nickname. And they flew all kinds of stuff. And on some flights, they would go in Beechcraft, twin engines, and they would bring back big loads of stuff. And they'd fly at night. That was another op called Operation Sea Spray. And what they did was they would blind the DOD satellites that were watching the southern hemisphere, for stuff like the Cuban Missile Crisis with Soviet missile launches from sea. And our DOD satellites were supposed to watch and protect the southern border of our country. And so they had avionics and transponder stuff that would, electronic stuff that would block those signals so that the black flights could come without being seen. And then once they got to the radar shelf of close to Arkansas, you had civilian radar towers like Houston, Hobby, and New Orleans. They reach out so far. Well, they would have another plane with the same tail number that was empty. And it would fly out and follow a flight path, and it would come back in behind the plane carrying all the drugs, or whatever it was, and it would get up right behind it, just underneath it, and they would descend right to the radar line, where they would be invisible under the line, and then they'd do a piggyback maneuver, where the Black Ops stuff would go down below the radar, and the empty plane with the same tail numbers would come up above the radar, so that it would look like the same radar blip to all our civilian air traffic controllers along the coast. And so that was called a piggyback maneuver, and then the black flight would go in and drop, stuff. A lot of times they had balloons, helium-filled balloons at night, and we would tie those balloons out, and the plane would come in and see them and just drop stuff out in bags. They deliver big bags of cash, big bags of coke. Ground teams would pick them up and then take them to places. So all this stuff was going on, and it was a big op. Some of it was in the Ouachita National Forest there, and so all this was going on. But Barry Seal, after these ops were all closed down, he had been set up and then busted by the DEA. It's how the CI shuts people up, you know. It's kind of like what happened to me. And they had put him in a halfway house, federal halfway house, I think in New Orleans. And, you know, the ops were all being closed down. The money was being washed. Senator John Kerry at the time was in the SEC, Security and Exchange Commission, and he was in charge with investigating the BCCI Bank in the Cayman. Massive money laundering going on there with drugs. But they covered all that up, and the records were lost, and so the whole thing was washed. Anyway, now I know I'm talking real fast, but we have a few things to go through here. But so Barry Seal was down at that halfway house, and the op had been all shut down, and they were cleaning the op up. There was a bunch of people, you know, in Arkansas that were the lower level workers, you know, and they were just murdered, suicided. It's a standard program where the case officers and agents pick up and move to another op somewhere in another country or whatever. And then all the lower people that saw a few things or did anything, they have accidents, they're killed, they're poisoned, and that's how they minimize blowback. Make sure there's no witnesses if anything comes forward later. And so what happened was when Barry Seal was at this halfway house, there were, I think it was 4 Colombian hitmen. He had to check in that halfway house. He went to his job and came back and had to stay at that federal halfway house at night. So he pulled up in the parking lot about 5 in the afternoon, and 4 Colombian hitmen, they had MAC-10 9mm machine guns. They came at him, you know, from all 4 directions, surrounded him, and they machine gunned him to death in his car. Okay, now he was another operative that had to be shut up, you know, to maintain zero blowback. But Arkansas, the whole thing in Arkansas, the Centaur Road, it was all messy. There's a lot of investigations, a lot of records, which we talked about last night, you know, that were moved over to the Murr building later. And, you know, the Clintons and the Rose Law Firm and the Whitewater scandal, all that, they were all dirty. They were real sloppy in their operations. And so when Barry Seal was shot, that was on February 19th, 1986. Okay? Now, when they were cleaning up all the blowback from that op here, down in Colombia, on the same exact day, February 19th, 1986, there were approximately 25 to 30 Colombian drug dealers all murdered on that same exact day. Okay? Now, one of them was a guy named Pablo Carrera. He was the number 2 guy in the Medellin cartel, cocaine cartel, and another one was Ochoa. I believe his name was Jorge. It's Ochoa, one of the Ochoa brothers. And so they were all murdered, and because they were the ones supplying the drugs. And so, anyway, all this was going on, and then the funny thing about it is, you know, you asked about that buddy of mine, the LAPD narcotics detective. His name was Michael Rupert. He had quite a following. He did a newsletter. He was the one that saw evidence of the CIA moving drugs through LA, and he confronted the CIA director and called him a drug dealer and so forth. And of course, he was threatened, and they tried to poison him, and they wrecked his computer. And that's a whole other story we can go into. It's amazing. But I was his first contact. He left the United States for a while, came back here, and I was his first contact here. But we're going to get back to Barry Seal now. He'd just been shot. 25 to 30 Colombian drug dealers had been killed, including the number 2 Medellin cartel guy. And so Barry Seal had all these planes from Rich Mountain Aviation that were used in the Centaur Rose ops in Arkansas. And one of those planes turned up later, and it was found, this is amazing, it was found at George Bush Jr.'s ranch in Crawford, Texas. And they got pictures of it. And after Seal was murdered, they took his planes and moved them over there. Now, the FAA number for this plane of Barry Seal's was N63085. And the serial number for the plane was BB1014. And Michael Rupert, after he got out of the LAPD, he was an investigative reporter. He's the one that first broke this story. And so this was a 1982 Beechcraft King Air 200. That was one of Barry Seal's favorite planes that he flew. And so they didn't even change the tail numbers. And so here's a guy hit and killed with machine guns at a federal halfway house in broad daylight. The assassins, none of them wore ski masks, no gloves, no nothing. So they weren't worried about blowback. And the amazing thing about all this is when they searched the car that Barry Seal had been shot in, they found in his trunk the private phone number of George Bush Sr., the ex-director of the Central Intelligence. Okay? So these ties, like I said, they were sloppy. And, the CIA was bringing all these drugs in our country, and Bill Clinton was using his front as the governor of Arkansas to do it. And then he used part of that money and stuff, and they got him elected and put him in the White House. So the corruption is staggering. The CIA's hand is everywhere through this whole deal. And then when Bill Clinton went to up to Washington, the very first thing he did as president, his first term, was fire every single U.S. attorney in the whole country. He's the first president to ever do that. And then here in the 10th Circuit, where my case was, he appointed Democrat Tom Strickland. And Tom Strickland was in a Denver law firm called Brownstein, Hyatt, and Fabier. And that law firm, it turns out that Norman Brownstein, the principal of that law firm, way back in the 70s, he had worked for the Council of Six. That's a group of 6 attorneys for the CIA. And those 6 attorneys are charged with handling litigation that the CIA does get into. Because if you conduct black ops and there is blowback, then sometimes there's lawsuits, wrongful death suits. They have to cover it up, so they have a whole team of attorneys to do that. And Norman Brownstein went from there to Denver, and then Tom Strickland, Democrat, appointed by Bill Clinton, was right on my case. He sat right in the front row, right by my bond hearing, with reporters from the Rocky Mountain News and the Denver Post, and they did a complete smear job. In my book, I have all the documents. I have the pictures, the newspaper articles, and it's a classic deal where they defame your character and tell lies and all that. So the whole thing from Arkansas was moved up, with the Clintons to the White House, and they spread through this sore, this cancer of shadow government, secret government stuff spread everywhere. And so, I know a whole lot more about all that stuff down there, but that's just the basic gist of it. The Clintons were involved in drug dealing. They were involved in pedophile rings. I do not have pictures, but I've seen things with my own eyes, and I know that it's true. And so all of this stuff it's hard for the average American citizen to digest. It's so far away. The rabbit hole is so much deeper than people think. And I'm just glad that I have the opportunity now to speak the truth, even though I do not have a lot of proof, because proof is very hard to get in a black op, like you said. Things are sanitized. Witnesses are murdered. Things are covered up. Records are lost. They had some records for instance, in the Rose Law Firm down there in downtown Little Rock, where Hillary was working, and Hubble was one of the partners there. And they had been subpoenaed by some state or a grand jury there in Arkansas for something about the Whitewater thing. And so it's like on the 3rd floor of the Rose Law Firm. And the records that were subpoenaed, there was a fire. Standard Clinton thing. And the fire burned them up just before the grand jury. And so they started investigating. They sent arson investigators, the fire department in there. They went to that 3rd floor of the Rose Law Firm, and they found that a space heater had been plugged in. And so they said that the space heater was the thing that burned the records. But here's the trick. That occurred in July. And everyone knows what Arkansas, is like in July. It's very hot, and all the heat in those buildings goes up to the top floor where the records were. So the question is, why would you have a space heater in July turned on up in the top floor of a hot records deal? And so that's how they covered it. The guys that burnt those records for the Clintons, they were black operators too, and they said, well, we know we're going to be investigated, so let's do this electric heater thing. And so it goes on and on and on. I could talk for 2 or 3 hours about, how Bill Clinton appointed the state medical examiner. And then after Centaur Rose, the operation was done, they started murdering and killing off all the lower guys that worked at the op. One of them was Kevin Ives. They said he took a butcher knife and cut his head off. And, committed suicide like that. And, all kinds of things. And the state medical examiner just covered it all up. And the whole thing was covered up. And there were a few good cops, in the State Patrol and the Arkansas Bureau of Investigation and all, and they were mostly hushed up in silence and threatened with their pension and so forth. So that whole thing, that's the basic gist of that. It's amazing. It's just amazing all the stuff that was going on.
Wow, that is.
Yeah, my last. I'll tell you one more thing. The last load, I was a driver. I would drive ordnance from the place between Oklahoma City and Tulsa there, and we just drive civilian truck. And the last load I took was close to a ton of C4 plastic explosives. I had 6 spools of 1,000-foot spools of det cord. We had detonators, M7 DuPont electric blasting caps, all the standard EOD stuff, and it was all going down to the Contras. President Reagan had ordered the CIA to do it. And some of the people that were killed and assassinated, I have not seen these myself, but I'm sure they're highly classified. But when the president makes a finding and he gives a finding and gives it to the CIA, that means they have a green light to assassinate someone. They have a presidential authority. I mean, if you go out and kill someone, then that's murder. But if you have a finding, then it's national security. See what I'm saying?
Whatever. Okay.
Yeah, and I just talked to some people just, in fact, today that were asked to go have dinner at Daniel Ortega's house down in Nicaragua. And they knew a lot of the people that were down there and saw a lot of the things that went on. The Russians were operating in the area and also the U.S. And there's a lot of secret stuff going on both ways.
Probably a lot of collusion, too.
Yeah. That stuff gets really hairy. You've got black operators like me. I was just an independent contractor. I wasn't working for the military. I wasn't working for Blackwater, Eric Prince. They weren't even in existence in that time. I wasn't working for CIA. I was working for people who were assets and or agents of the CIA. So we were cutouts, basically. And if I got caught driving a bunch of explosives in a truck, oftentimes I wouldn't know what the ordinance was. I drove many, many trips, and I did not know what I was driving. I was not allowed even to know where it was going. And so I would go to my principals, and they would say, take this truck to the Walmart parking lot in some city and put the hood up at 9 o'clock in the morning and sit there. You got to wear a red hat, a baseball hat, and you wait. And your contact will approach, and he'll have a blue baseball hat on. And he's going to walk up in the parking lot, and he's going to ask you a code. What, do you have an engine trouble? And then you say, yeah, I think, the timing's off or something. And then he'd say, well, I think, maybe I can give it a start and see. And then that would be the code. I didn't know who he was. I didn't know where the load was going, and I didn't know what was in it. My job was to drop it to that point, give it to that contact, and then I just walked away. All I did was walk away, and I got my own way back. And then that person would get in the truck, start it, and drive it off. So that way they maintain plausible deniability. And if they arrested someone or tortured you, you know, or whatever, no one would know. You could only give up very limited compartmentalized information. And that's how a lot of that stuff was moved. You know, it's a massive network of arms going down there covertly, and then the drugs coming back.
You know, you mentioned a couple of names inadvertently, and I have heard, you know, it's all rumor, but like Tyson and Sam Walton were heavy into the CIA. Is there, that's just chatter that I've heard. Do you know anything about that?
Well, I don't know. You know, we try to deal with actionable intelligence if we can get it. That's the hard part, is getting accurate, actionable intelligence. That means intelligence that you can actually act on. And, but I did hear crosstalk and chatter from some of the guys, at various times. You know, Hillary Clinton was on the board of, Walmart, when it was first started. And, that's all I know about that. But I do know that the Rose Law Firm, you know, they were involved in, rubber stamping a lot of legal contracts in the Whitewater, real estate thing. And, they were also involved in laundering money through the HUD, that's human urban development, and that went up to the Millman Associates up here in Denver. And so they were washing money through banks, through HUD. I mean, how can you wash $100 million a month? Okay, just figure that out, and blend it all in and mix it out. And they were zeroing out accounts and doing all kinds of creative things. And then they were cutting their teeth for what the Clinton Foundation is today. You know, the Clinton Foundation is nothing but a massive money laundering scheme. And I hope they get busted for that, because that uranium deal and the whole thing down there is it's all crooked, and the Clintons belong in prison. There was a massive, the big CIA station down in Haiti. And there was a lot of money and cocaine and stuff flowing through there too. So I can talk a whole lot more about this, but I don't want to say too much.
That's fine. That's fine. No.
This stuff is all old, and the stuff that's going on more recently is very shocking.
Oh.
But it has to do with Afghanistan, and they've had record opium crops over there. It's record all-time highs.
Oh, that's well reported on the internet.
Yeah.
Ever since we got back into Afghanistan over there, the opium production has just skyrocketed. And what they say is our own troops are guarding the opium fields now.
Well, I will tell you about this. It's kind of diverging from the subject, overall subject. However, during the course of operations, I saved he's a major in Canadian intelligence. He's working with Northcom out of Colorado Springs at the Cheyenne Mountain facility. I helped save his life on a deal one time, but he was active and stationed in Kabul right when all that started, 10, 15 years ago when we went over there. And he went from there to Baghdad, and he came to check in here at NORAD. And he came out here. He was still dressed in his military major uniform. And he won't talk on the phone or anywhere. So we hiked out in the woods like a lot of us black operators do. Make sure there's no surveillance, no one can see us. There's no drones or satellites can watch from above. We get under the trees and the rocks, and we're all real spooky about that. But he told me straight out of his mouth, he's just been in a briefing with a general over there, and he told me the U.S. guys were ordered to guard the opium fields and what little infrastructure they had relating to the oil and gas pipeline stuff. And what a lot of people don't know is one of the real reasons we went over to Afghanistan in the first place was that there was something called the Brightest Corporation down in, I believe it was Argentina, and they had been drilling test wells in the Caspian Sea, and they had found trillion, that's with a T, $12 trillion of proven reserves in the Caspian Sea of gas and oil. And they had made contracts with the Taliban government. Well, our American oil companies and British Petroleum wanted their mitts on that stuff, and they couldn't get it. So when we invaded Afghanistan and threw the Taliban out, then the U.S. government said all pre-existing contracts for this oil are null and void. So the brightest corporation got fucked, and they filed a big lawsuit. I can't remember what circuit it is, the third or the fourth circuit. You know, I think it was out of Houston down there. They filed a massive lawsuit saying they put all the money into drilling and testing, and then they had the contracts, and then, of course, our rigged courts up here went along with our government. So if anyone out there wants to do any Google research on this stuff, you check out the Caspian Sea and find out who owns all those leases and all that stuff over there. 12 trillion, that's with a T. So that's one of the real reasons we went over there, was to get our mitts on all those proven reserves. Okay, they were proven reserves. The other reason we went over there was to get a hold of the world's largest opium supply. This all goes back to Vietnam, when the triad, the guys, General Richard Secord and Thomas Shackley and all the CIA guys over there were running the heroin and from the opium fields in Laos and Cambodia. And that's what Air America was about. The CIA was running their covert arms and drug stuff. And I had job offers over there in Ho Chi Minh City after, Saigon fell. And moving a lot of the arms and stuff. They had to clean up all the arms after the war, and so they put them all in big warehouses and dug up the booby traps, unexploded mines, ordnance, all that stuff, and then they sold it through their channels in South America. I was in the middle of that op right there. But, this thing is a worldwide drug and arms deal, and it's the bread and butter. And so if we're going to take down the deep state and the shadow government, it's not just here in America. It's not just the Clintons. It's a big thing. It ties in with the bankers. It ties in with several intelligence agencies. It ties in with military contracting companies, Lockheed Martin, Boeing. It's a big, big nest. And so it's the shadow government. It's the New World Order. And so, anyway, I'm just trying to shed a light on a few things that I saw. But Hillary Clinton was working on the board at Walmart. I don't know anything other than that, and I never heard anything about Sam Walton being involved with CIA. But when you look fast forward, Scott, today, you've heard all these stories about FEMA camps and Walmart working together.
Yep.
Where the Walmarts can be converted, the parking lots can be put chain link fenced and, the whole thing, and converted rapidly over to a FEMA center in times of national emergency.
Exactly.
So it's very possible that occurred way back then. I don't have any actual intelligence on that at this time.
Now, have you ever heard of Larry Nichols?
Yes.
Have you ever met him?
No, but I have some people that are supposed to be sending him some of our stuff about the Murrah building.
He is another one that's come out and pledged to take the Clintons down. He's been on Alex Jones a bunch. I follow him. He had his own little YouTube channel there for a little bit, but he's really sick.
Yeah, I heard he had throat cancer or something.
Yeah, and he got to the point where he couldn't really hardly talk, and he was still going after it, but he just shut down his channel. And it was right for the Marines. The rumor has it, chatter is that the Marines stormed the CIA and the FBI building. They stormed the FBI to get the Uranium-1 files that the Fed's been withholding from Congress all this time, and to storm the CIA to shut down Operation Mockingbird, where they have all this control over the media. But it was right before that he shut his channel down, and it was kind of questionable to me. It's like, wow, I wonder why he would do that, because I followed him. I liked the guy. And I actually tried to meet him, but I sent him a couple of letters saying, because he lives up in Arkansas, and I had his address, but, you know, I wasn't going to just drive up there if he wasn't going to even, you know, say, hey, yeah, I'll answer the door or anything. So, but he's been really, really sick, so I just kind of, you know, wanted to bring him up because I kind of had a lot of respect for him because he did a lot of dirty ops, and then he came clean because once he found out all the drugs that were going on, and he didn't like it. And
and a lot of us are like that. I mean, I did black ops. You know, we were not just criminals; we were high-level criminals, and we were criminals not only in the United States but other countries. And the reason I say that right now, it's true, but they can't prove it. Because we were black operators, and we sanitized everything. That's what we were trained to do. I was trained by some real high-level people. You know, I didn't go to the farm at Langley. They tried to recruit me, and I would have, if I took recruitment, I would have went to the farm at Langley and studied wet and dry demolitions and, you know, all the stuff they do. But I was trained by people mostly that had been in the Vietnam War, that had worked for the CIA there in covert ops and also just in the Army and other things. And those guys are better training, I think, than some classroom because they had just got back from a real live war and they could sort out the bullshit, the wheat from the flax. And they knew what worked in the field. They knew what worked with the Viet Cong, and they knew what worked with the booby traps and stuff. So I got some really good training. But you know, you're talking about that sea Operation Mockingbird. That even started like in the late 40s and the late 50s in television and radio. And so in 1948, Congress passed that Smith-Mundt Act, which is what it's called, and it authorized the U.S. State Department to disseminate propaganda outside the United States. But it specifically forbade it in this act to do so inside the United States. Okay? So later on, the CIA secretly began to penetrate our own U.S. media as television got bigger and bigger and bigger after World War II, and all the war production was converted over to civilian assets like, you know, refrigerators, lawnmowers, TVs. And they codenamed that op, as you said, Operation Mockingbird. And it was implemented to plant disinformation in our U.S. media, the classic counterintelligence thing. And, you know, it just magnified, and it kept going on and on. And they started the U.S. Army's 4th Psychological Operations Group at Fort Bragg. That was a PSYOPs group. And they were planting stories in the U.S. media which supported the Reagan administration's policies in Central America, because Reagan was covertly going against the Boland Amendment and doing all that stuff down there. They were taking the arms down there and bringing back the dope to pay for it. And so this led later into the Iran-Contra thing. And but they had put out a lot of Fourth Army PSYOPs propaganda. And William Colby was director of CIA back then. He testified to the Senate Select Committee to study governmental operations with respect to intelligence activities. That was run, you know, and the Frank Church ran that back in 75, you know, the Church Commission.
Yeah, I've heard of it. I don't know it very well.
Yeah, well, DCI, Director of Central Intelligence, Colby, testified in front of Congress that over 400 agents, CIA agents, were active in the United States media to control reported content in American mainstream magazines, newspapers, and TV. And so the CIA director himself told Congress that they had 400 CIA agents. Now, he was probably lying to Congress, and they probably had 800. So that was Mockingbird, and so they were controlling the media way back then, and now you know it's not how it is today. You've got YouTube, Google. They're in a massive. I was in Panama City down there for that op with Noriega, and I saw things, you know, with my own eyes. When we got back to the States, I watched all this civilian news. And at first, when I was young and you know, kind of a cherry and going through this stuff, I was shocked. My mouth would fall open. I mean, I'd get back to the States and I'd see this stuff, and it's such lies. I mean, I couldn't believe it. Shocked me. of how deep the lies are. And one of the CIA handlers I had, he was on ops down in Bogota, Colombia. He told me, he said, you have to go out of the United States and see some black ops overseas. Okay, most people just go overseas and they see tourist stuff. But he was in black ops. Then you come back here and you see the cover stories that they feed the American people. And he said, I hate to say this about my own country, but Americans are some of the most heavily brainwashed people in any country I've been to. And this guy did 2 tours in Special Forces, and he's a patriot and everything. And he says, I hate to say this about our country, but the information control, you know, they talk about the Iron Curtain around Russia. And he said, America has an electronic curtain. The news and the media and the stories are all filtered and doctored so many times that it's laughable. And after a while, I got numb to it. I got to where I didn't even pay attention. I have time to waste.
Right.
I was too busy trying to stay alive.
You know, and Howard is one of my mentors, and we talk about, I tell him how brain is. One of my favorite sayings is, the smarter the phones get, the dumber the people get. And it just cracks him up because he's an old guy. He was around way before all these computers and all this shit. And another thing that really has brainwashed everybody is the education system, and
right.
really got them believing that the government can do no wrong. And then when you see the propaganda of the media and how they just beat it, it's like that old saying, say a lie big enough, long enough, and enough times, and everybody will believe it. And the attention span of the average American now, I coined the phrase, it's 3.2 seconds. Everybody has the attention span of a goldfish.
Yeah, and they have such control mechanisms. We began this talking about blowback and stuff like that. If we got a little time here, I'll give you a brief. This story's in this book that we wrote. No one gets to see this kind of stuff, okay? And it's time to bring the truth out. But this is one way they control the blowback. For instance, when I was planted with evidence and thrown into federal prison up there by McVeigh, I found out that Judge Edward Nottingham in the 10th Circuit, he was the guy that had to resign, you know, with the sex scandal with prostitutes later on. He was in sex ring and stuff too. And anyway, he had been nominated to his position. It's a lifetime appointment by Director of Central Intelligence, George Bush, and he'd been in that court for a number of ways. So what I found out when I got in there was that every single guy that had a court case with CIA or NSA or anybody all got steered to Judge Nottingham, and they used what they call the PROMIS software. It was an internal DOJ, Department of Justice, computer program that was designed and programmed so they could cross-correlate cases and organize things. And so anyone that had a CIA thing would get flagged, and then they would send them to their buddy, you know, Judge Nottingham, who would make very sure that the case never saw the light of day. And here's one of the tactics they used. Now, this is all true. I have actionable intelligence. This will shock probably many of your listeners. So, I'll try to make a big story into a short thing. There were 4 of us in there that had stuff involving CIA blowback. Mine was the Murrah building. And Gary Kagan, he was also a shooter for the CIA that moved some C4 down there and stuff. He was in there, and a couple other people. Judge Nottingham would go into a bond hearing. They would sanitize everything about the CIA out of their court records, and he would say, "Well, you guys need a mental evaluation. We need to make sure you're it's one of their tricks." Then they'd send these guys to the medical facility in Springfield, Missouri. It's a federal medical facility where they put the insane and old guys that are dying in the federal prison system and so forth. And so one of the guys that was in our pod, this was in the FCI Inglewood in B unit, maximum security, in the B unit part. I know his name. but he's still alive, so I'm not going to say his name. Let's just call him John. Okay, so John had been in the Army Rangers, and he had a nice long career in the Rangers. And one day CO calls him and brings him in, and they've got some CIA guys there. And they're all alone, and they say, we need to pull you out of your MO with the Army here, and you're going to run a few Black Ops for us if you want to. And so Sequest ran Black Ops down in Nicaragua with us. There's a lot of ex-military and active military that were pulled into the Black Ops community and used for certain things, then restationed back to their original assignments. And what the CI commonly did was they would go into the Department of Defense files and doctor the files. And if a guy was gone for a month on a Black Op, they'd just make up a bunch of stuff that he was posted somewhere and he got a medal and, it was all covered up. So there was no record, no blowback. And so Sequest had been down in Nicaragua, and he was on a Black Ops team for the CIA. They were all trained operators. And they came on to a village out in the jungle, and they saw a big burn mark in the canopy up on top. It looked like a zigzag burn gray ashen mark. And they got in this little village. He said there's about 150, 175 people. Everybody was dead. All the kids, all the old men, people sitting at the fire with cooking pots, everybody dead. No marks, no bullet holes, no smells, nothing. But the animals were all still alive. The goats, the pigs, the chickens, the monkeys, the birds, everything alive. Only the people dead. So they immediately put on their NBC suits and figured the Russians were spraying that blue rain like they use in Afghanistan. It's some kind of neurotoxin like the sarin and tabin, the trimethyl ethylthiocholine groups, the nerve agents. And so they put on all their mop gear, and they collapsed back the perimeter, and they had an encrypted sat link, and they called a CI station chief. And it got nightfall, and they said they were sitting there, and they kept seeing these beams, these lights coming down from the sky. And they saw several of them. It was like big spotlights or laser beams, and they didn't know what it was. And they had a puff plane backup. That's like a C-130 with the miniguns on the side. Because if you call it a close air support, in a jungle environment, you can't see anything in the canopy. You can't hit anything. So they just go in there and blast the whole area, And that was their backup. And I believe that plane was stationed over at the Alacos Air Base in El Salvador. However, all this is encrypted satellite, so they called the Air Force handlers there, and they said, do y'all have any air traffic in the area? And there was no scheduled flights. So the next morning, I'm getting to the medical thing here. I have to tell you this story so you'll know how they covered and why they covered this up. So the next morning, the CI station chief himself flew out a 204 Huey chopper, and he lined them all up. And these guys are a Black Ops team. They're not supposed to exist. No dog tags, no nothing. They were using Russian equipment in case they had to waste some civilians or something, and they could cover everything up. And the station chief himself took all the film and cameras from his own Black Ops team. And he said, y'all weren't supposed to be here and find this. Y'all didn't see this. Y'all don't know nothing about it. And they said, what's our orders, sir? And they said, you stay here one more day. They were worried about the Russians coming and discover what had happened here. Okay? And then leave and go about your original objective. And so Sequest sat for another night, and they watched these lights. And none of the guys are all trained military operators. Some of them from NOM, some of them from other things. And it was a big mystery. And they said it was probably the Star Wars defense satellites testing plasma beam weapons. And what they were doing are laser weapons, and they were using the pre-existing conflict between the Sandinistas and the Contras. It was a civil war for cover. And they tested one of those beams on a whole village. And the beams can be modulated. If they're using microwave lasers, they can be modulated around the resonance frequency, and they can determine and delineate between human DNA and animal DNA.
Oh.
So the beams can be tuned frequency-wise to disrupt human tissue and not the animal tissue. And that's what they were figuring out. They didn't know. This is what they saw. Okay? So fast forward, Sequest comes up here to Colorado Springs, and he retires out of the Rangers. And one of his op buddies comes in a couple of years later and says, talking to him, says, what are you doing? He says, I'm bored, civilian life, I'm bored shitless. He said, what are you going to do? I'm going to write a book. And the guy told him, don't you dare write a book about any of that CIA shit down there in Nicaragua. And the next day, 2 FBI agents knocked on Sequest's door. They had his phone tapped. And they had a warrant for his arrest under national security. And they brought him in there, and they threw him in the pod with me. Now, guess which judge he got?
Your buddy.
Judge Edward Nottingham, the CIA judge. Out of all the judges up there, that's the judge who assigned him. Guess what Nottingham did? He sent him to the Springfield Medical Facility for a court-ordered medical evaluation. So Sequest left out of there. We didn't see him for about 6 months. So one day, I'm standing down there. They have the big electronic trap doors in the prison, and I was standing out in the pod, and I heard the air, and then the door opened, and the guard had his hand on an inmate's chest, and the guy was about to fall over. And he yelled at me. He said, Snodgrass, get over here and help me with this inmate. And I said, yes, sir. And I went over there, and it was fucking Sequest back from the mental hospital. And so I said, what do you want me to do? He said, hold him. He can't stand. And I grabbed him, and his head was slobbering. He slobbered a big wet spot all over my prison uniform. And I said, what the fuck you want me to do with this guy? And the CO said, take him down to lower B unit, cell 23 in lower south. And so I took him down there and put him in there. And that night he was so fucked up on all the drugs they'd given him, he pissed on his cellie's head and got in a fight. And they had to fight and everything. And so Sequest started coming around the next few days. And he was real paranoid because they drugged him. And the only reason he talked to me and told me these stories is because I knew some of the code words that were used in Nicaragua. They had certain code words. And nobody knows them unless you're in the right intelligence circles. And so when I told him those words, he said, you really were there? And I said, yeah. So he opened up to me and he told me what happened. And so Sequest told me that whole story about the Star Wars Defense Initiative and how the CIA covered up the murder of all that. They were going to lay it off on the Russians. They were actually field testing their weapons from space. And so I was there the day that Sequest got out, and after all this time, he went to the nut hut. They declared him mentally incompetent, see, in case he ever wrote a book, and then they dropped all the charges. And I was there with him. He was in my cell on the day that they dropped the charges, and they said, you're going home. And they made him sign an agreement that if they dropped the charges, he would never, ever talk about any of it or anything. And so he signed it. And he came sat there before he left, and he looked at me, and he said, you saw what they did to me. I said, they done it to 3 other guys in here. It's all in my book. I got their names, everything. That's how the Justice Department covers up for CIA. They'll take guys and send them to the nut hut for a mental evaluation before they're ever tried, before they're ever convicted, and make sure their brains are fucking scrambled, so that even if they do come back and go to trial, they're going to sound like slobbering idiots in front of the jury. Meanwhile, CIA has plausible deniability and blowback control. This is how they do it. The American people out here never see this stuff. I never saw it until I lived it. And Sequest told me before he left, he said, you better shut up about the CIA. He said, if you talk about any of this stuff, they are going to kill you, or they're going to plant you like they already did, and then they're going to send you to the nut hut, to taser you down with tasers in a back room where no one can see. They will run you up with Halzon or Dilaudid or Thorazine, and they will put you in a rubber room. They put him in a room. He vaguely remembered being in a straitjacket. And he pissed and shit himself sometime, then they'd come clean it up whenever they got around to it. But this is how they treated our veterans. This is how they treated guys that served our country. And so real. I've seen it. I know it. It's highly hidden. And this is the level to which our shadow government has descended. Now, there's a lot of good people in the CIA. I know some of them. They are very good people doing their job. And then there's some other people, you know, the black hats, as you call them, that are downright satanic, evil, scheming, calculating, criminally minded, and they're hiding behind their legitimate positions in the CIA. And so this is what we have to expose. Everyone has to walk into this with their head up and their eyes open. If we're going to take back the United States of America for the people and by the people, we have to know the truth. We have to know what our government has been doing behind our backs. We have to know why John Kennedy's head went forward and back on the Zapruder film. We have to know why the Twin Towers fell almost, you know, they fell. And then Building 7, which was never hit by a missile or never hit by a plane, fell almost perfectly straight down. We have to know why the Murrah building was blown up. We have to take our country back while we still have the chance.
Yeah, and we have to wake people up to do it and get stories like this out and let people start being able to digest the truth, because it is not palatable at all. And a lot of people, it's kind of like I've also heard other people say, like Howard even, you know, that once the real truth comes out, a lot of people are not going to be able to handle it. And they even may commit suicide, you know, because they just can't believe that the government is this evil, this corrupt. Or, you know, let's just say we had a grid down failure because of some false flag that they do. All the power goes off and people can't get on the internet or their smartphones, and they figure, well, shit, life's not worth living. I can't get on the internet no more. They are not mentally prepared to handle this stuff. This is what this is all about, is getting you mentally prepared to accept the truth. Because once you start finding out how bad a lot of this stuff is,
Yeah.
it's going to make a lot of people really uncomfortable.
Oh, yeah, and the people that are pulling all these scams and games, they don't want people like me or any Thomas Drake or William Denny, you know, Edward Snowden, any of the whistleblowers. They don't want us talking. That's why they lean on us and threaten us and all the horse shit they do. But we have to stand up with our heads open, and the last thing we can do is fall prey to their fear, because fear cripples the mind, and the mind is the best weapon. All these AK-47s and rockets and Hellfire missiles and Scud missiles and biotoxins and protein synthesized poisons and all the horse shit they use, those weapons are merely extensions of the mind, and the mind is the best weapon. So if they cripple that with fear, then they've effectively silenced the people. Are you ready for another good story about the NSA?
Oh, always.
Okay, this happened up there in the 10th Circuit where I was. I'm going to go through it briefly. Many of your readers, your subscribers, I'm sure they're all familiar with the 9/11 thing. The towers went down, and then they passed. What did they pass? The Patriot Act in the wake of it. All right, so the Patriot Act was talking about terrorism and, surveillance and everything. Well, George Bush Jr., the president, had secretly ordered the NSA to begin conducting domestic surveillance on the American people. Now, they had to keep this op secret. And NSA went around to various telecom companies, Verizon, AT&T, so forth. And they told them, look, we need to install these special taps they have. We have an analog phone line, for instance, the old analog. They had inductive taps and straight taps and various things. But the stuff that they were using now were satellites, with the cell phone signals, and they were all through fiber optic light cables. And so the NSA developed a new tap that they could tap the fiber optic stuff, and they could reroute them and make copies of all the digital signals, and then reroute them back through the servers for AT&T or whoever it was. So the NSA began a program of secretly installing all this stuff. And one of the guys, a lot of your listeners may know, especially in the Denver area, is a guy named Joe Naccio. He was the Q West CEO. And so NSA called him, and he had his vice president in there, and they had a secret meeting, you know, just like they always do. And NSA said, we want to install this tap equipment in here, and it's a national security issue. And Joe Naccio said, fine, but I have a problem. He says, what happens if there's some blowback later on, and the NSA gets caught, or somebody like, you know, William Binney or Thomas Drake or Edward Snowden or any of these NSA guys blow the whistle, and we are conducting an illegal, unconstitutional wiretap? What am I going to tell my stockholders? What if our stocks lose millions of dollars because they know that we knowingly cooperated and gave their privacy away in an illegal, unconstitutional action? And the NSA didn't have any answer with that. They just said, look, we want you to install the stuff, and if you do, we'll give you a bunch of cush contracts, you'll get government stuff, satellite stuff, telemetry stuff, we'll give you everything. Well, Naccio said, let me run it by my corporate attorneys. And the attorneys told him, he said, this is highly illegal. It's unconstitutional, and we suggest that you don't do it. So Joe Naccio told the NSA, I don't want to participate. Well, most of the other companies like AT&T and all of them already had. This was a thorn in their side. They don't like resistance. So they cooked up a court case against Joe Naccio, just like me, complete with planted evidence and doctored files, and they got him on an insider stock trading thing. It was all bogus, all manufactured. So they indicted him. They took all the lies to the grand jury up there in the 10th Circuit, and they indicted Joe Naccio, multimillionaire. Guess which judge got his case?
Your buddy.
Judge Edward Nottingham, appointed by ex-director Central Intelligence. I know I'm repeating myself, but I'm trying to hammer these points in. Every case, CIA, NSA, anything with national security, he was their fall guy. He was their guy that covered it all up. So anyway, Joe Naccio went to court. He had millions of dollars. They fought a big, long court battle, and Judge Nottingham did everything he could to weigh the case in the government's favor. And so here's what happened. The vice president of operations at QWest that was in the meeting with the NSA and Joe Naccio, he was subpoenaed to testify, and Judge Nottingham cooked up a reason why he couldn't testify. He was going to corroborate Joe Naccio's story that the whole thing was planted and it was a government retribution scheme because he wouldn't cooperate with them in their illegal, unconstitutional wiretapping. And he had subpoenaed his vice president because he was there in the meeting. He heard the meeting. And he was going to be a witness saying, yeah, the NSA was pressuring us to do all this illegal stuff. But they wouldn't let him testify. And they rigged the case every way they could. And then Naccio got a bunch of time in prison. And this is how they do people who won't go along with the deep state or shadow government stuff, just like me. They plant you with evidence. They cook up a bunch of lies. They forge documents. They fake fingerprints. They got all their games. And the people who are patriots like Naccio, who stood up for the Constitution, he goes to prison. A patriot like me. My dad was at World War II in Guadalcanal. I'm a patriot of the United States. I get planted and put in prison because I refused to blow up the Murrah building. I did right, I did good, and I got punished for it. Look at Edward Snowden. Scott, I know you know a lot of stuff about this, and these guys all, I mean, you go example after example after example. Then we also found, I know I'm talking too much, but this has to get out. We found inside the 10th Circuit Federal Court one of the key gems of how the shadow government manipulates the judicial system, and this is in this book. Okay. When a court case comes in the 10th Circuit Court, they call a jury wheel.
Yeah.
and there's about 300 and something people. They're citizens that are picked. Well, the jury wheel sits there until such time as a prosecutor calls a case. So let's say Timothy McVeigh's case comes up to the 10th Circuit Federal Court. It's a big-time case. What the FBI had done, we found out. We have proof of it. Out of the jury wheel, say there's a girl named Susie Smith. Okay, she's just some woman. The FBI would go through all of their agents nationwide and do profiles, and they'd find another woman that was an FBI agent that looked similar to Susie Smith. So from the time the jury wheel started to the time the court case was actually called and they picked the jurors, the FBI would send their own undercover agent to duplex the identity of the citizen in the jury wheel.
Wow.
You understand what I just said?
Yeah.
Okay, now that way they made sure that person would be picked on the jury. Now their cover, their front is, yeah, this is Susie Smith, a citizen from Denver. The whole time they were an undercover agent sent there, no matter what the evidence, no matter what the trial, no matter what was said, they were going to vote guilty. So that at least the feds were always guaranteed a hung trial, no matter what was in the evidence.
Right.
This is how they rigged the jury. This goes back to Al Capone in Chicago. You know all that stories of how they bought off the jurors and paid the judges. Well, the FBI used undercover agents to rig the juries on high-profile cases like Joe Naccio, like Timothy McVeigh, where it would guarantee either a conviction or a hung jury. Now, how I found this out, Kerry Gagan, he was a CI shooter, a black operator, a contractor. He was given the job to move a bunch of C4 plastic explosives in a van to Trinidad, Colorado. He was told to meet his contacts there. They were 3 Middle Eastern men, and they had a van, and they had plans to the Murrah building in there. And when he saw that, he thought, here's the guys from the Middle East. They've got plans in one of our federal buildings. He went straight back to Secret Service up in Denver and told them. He says, I don't know what's going on here. I think I'm being set up wrong. Well, anyway, CI got wind of that, so they hushed him up. So they planted his house with C4, and then they threw him on an explosive charge in there with us. So Gagan comes up to me in the pod, and he says, you're Cody. I've heard you've something about Oklahoma City or something. And I said, yeah. And he says, I have all of the receipts. He says, they're doing this jury wheel scam, and they did it on my case in case I go to trial. He said, I have electric receipts. I have DMV registrations. I have photographs from the DMV, phone bills. And so we went into the law library, and we put 3 8-foot tables, and he laid all this out. He had the Susie Smith, the juror that was duplexed. And then he had the actual FBI agent that was posing, and that none of the signatures matched. The pictures didn't even match. And he hired a handwriting expert, and then he hired 2 more, and 3 of them all said that there was no way this was the same person. Okay? So we get to the bottom of this. I told him, I said, do you know how explosive this is? I said, do you know the kind of corruption you're revealing here? Where they're using undercover agents to pose as jurors to rig the trials? Then the judge himself is a CIA appointed guy. Then the U.S. attorney is nominated by Bill Clinton and worked for the Hyatt, Brownstein, and Faber law firm, where Brownstein was the counsel of the 6th CIA in the 70s with George. But I mean, it's a big wheel. It's a big tie. And he said, yeah. And I said, you better shut that. I said, I ain't going to say nothing, but you better hide that shit, not show nobody else. Because what they'll do is snitch on you to get their own sentence cut.
Right.
So, this is true. I lived this. We went back to the pod. He had these big legal files with all this stuff in them, and he went in his cell. I went in mine. They locked us down the night. I got back out, went to the law library early in the morning, because I was running the law library there, and I looked down, and 8 guards, 4 in front, forward, and back. They're all dressed in goon outfits, bulletproof vests, helmets, shields, tasers. They go straight to Gagan's cell. They push him against the wall and handcuff him. We're inside a maximum security federal prison, and they're handcuffing him and arresting him. Then all those files that me and him just looked at that had all this evidence he was trying to get into court, they took them. And they marched him out of there. And I saw it, and I thought, oh, shit, I was with him last night. They got cameras in there. They're going to pinch me or they're going to kill me. So I just went in my cell. I got my shit ready, and I thought they were going to come throw me in the hole or just go kill me. So I got ready to be arrested, too, but nothing happened. So some time went by, and I went up to the CO's office, and I said, hey, what happened with all those goons in here, you know, arresting Gagan? And he goes, shut up, Snodgrass, or you're next. And I said, yes, sir. So we waited about 3 or 4 weeks, and I went to the CO's office, a different CO, and I said, hey, you know that guy, Gary Kagan, that guy that was here, and they arrested him out of here? And he said, yeah. I said, well, what happened to that guy? And they said, they sent him to the Springfield Medical Facility. And he was never heard from. He was the guy with the evidence to take down the 10th Circuit Court for tampering with the juries.
Wow.
All right. Now, I know this firsthand. I mean, I was shoulder to shoulder with him. I saw this stuff with my own eyes. And the night that I saw it, the very next morning they arrested him and everything disappeared. He disappeared. All the evidence disappeared. And that CO looked at me and he said, Snodgrass, if you know what's good for you, you better not ever mention his name. And I said, yes, sir. Now, I swear to God, I swear that this is all true. I can't prove it because I wasn't allowed to have any cameras or video phones or you can't make any copies. I mean, I saw this with my own eyes, and that's all I can say. So this is the corruption in our country. This is how the CIA steers cases with the promised software in the Justice Department. Then they put their own CIA-appointed guys in there. This is how the shadow government really works. They control the drug trade. They control the arms trade. They control the judicial. And they bust out all their competition. It's real.
Yeah, and it's deep. And
Do you want to hear another story?
yeah, we got some time.
All right. Well, this one deals with ATF agent Blake Butler, the nation's top cop. He's the guy that planted me with evidence. He was the guy that was at Waco, Texas, at the Branch Davidians. He was the guy that was at Ruby Ridge, and he was the guy that was working at the Murrah building April 19th, 1995, when it blew up. But he called in sick that day, I guess. So, the guy's a real dirty cop. Everywhere he's been, people are murdered. Well, there was a guy on our indictment. His name was Terry Parrish. His nickname was Crash. And he was a meth dealer. And he had a big connection to the cartels down in Mexico. And so, during the course of Operation ATF DEA Operation Stingray in Colorado Springs, Terry, we'll just call him Crash, he sold 30 pounds of methamphetamine, which is, we call it zip or crank on the street. He sold 30 pounds of zip to undercover agent Blake Butler. And Blake Butler was making 5-pound buys, okay? And so it was $10,000 a pound, so he'd get $50,000 from the ATF office for front money. And then he'd go give the money to Terry, then he'd get the 5 pounds of meth. Now his job was to take the evidence and take it to the DEA office. But instead, he would take it to a safe house and he would pull 3 pounds of methamphetamine off and then put 3 pounds of cut back on it, okay, and then turn the 5 pounds into the DEA. All right? Now, you ask, how do I know this? We got all the files through the discovery, and we got the DEA, whenever they get drugs in a case, they send them to a processing lab for analysis so they can use it in future court proceedings. But in this case, we were in the 10th Circuit in Denver, so the DEA office in Colorado Springs sent this stuff to the Western Regional Processing Lab in San Francisco, California. I have all the reports. I have all their analysis, the percentages, and everything. Okay? Now, so what my brother was doing was cutting the dope, and he was keeping all that for some very personal use. Then towards the end of the bust, he would take the front money he was getting from ATF. Then he'd go to Crash, to Terry Parrish, and tell him, "Oh, I'm a little bit light, I'll pay you, $50,000 next time." Well, he was pocketing the ATF buy money and the drugs. All right, so the guy's a real criminal. I mean, really bad. He's getting rich off this whole thing while he's planning people with evidence. Okay. So, all of this stuff is real, and I didn't put some of the files on. I've got 20,000 pages plus of court discovery, DEA files, ATF files, 302 forms, activity log reports, tape numbers, Colorado Springs Police, State Police. I have so many files, it's just, there's no way you can put it in a book. But anyway, that's one of the stories that we tell in the book, is how the cops were doing that. And what happened was Terry Parrish was working with the cartel members out of Mexico. And I know some of them down there, and I'm not going to say their names. But I talked to the one that was delivering stuff to him. He had been brought up and is facing life without parole for international drug trafficking on a separate case. And he approached me and asked me to help him with some things. And he was the one that told me how they make the methamphetamine down in Mexico. And they put a lab cut on it in the labs, and they could bring it up here to the States because they get all the chemicals down there they need. They're not on the restricted list like they are up here. And they were getting the phenylpropanol and 40% methylamine in water, reagent-grade anhydrous ether, and reagent-grade sulfuric acid, and all the chemicals and stuff to manufacture the methamphetamine. They'd make it in their cartel labs, and it was 40% pure meth when it crossed the border. When it got up here to the States, Terry Parrish didn't cut it or anything. He just took that 40% meth. He was getting it for like $5,000 a pound. Well, they sold it in kilos, but he broke it into weights for the Americans. And he was getting it about $5,000 a pound delivered, and he was selling it to the ATF agents for $10,000 a pound. And he didn't have to cut it. So when Bo turned the ATF agent Butler turned those in, we got the Western Regional Processing Lab, Scott. And do you know what percent methamphetamine the lab said it was? 3%. Now, you know yourself, I mean, any logical person would, if you took 3% drugs out on the street and tried to sell them, you'd probably get shot.
Yeah.
And so this is what was happening. This is the kind of stuff they get away with. This is the kind of stuff that nobody hears about and nobody sees. And the only way you can see it is to hide behind those walls and see the truth. That's why federal courtrooms do not allow any cameras. Have you ever wondered why they have those guys that sketch, and they'll show on the news some trial and they have an artist that sketch? Why does an artist have to sketch? Why can't they take a camera in there?
Exactly.
Because they hide everything. And then once you get behind a wall in the BOP, that's the Bureau of Prison, you talk about corruption. Man, you think the Clintons and all of this stuff is bad. The BOP, I could talk another 3 hours about the corruption inside of that. So it's systemic and it's endemic in our culture. We Americans got handed the fattest, richest country in the world after World War II. My dad fought. He was at Pearl Harbor, Guadalcanal, my uncle at the Battle of Bulge. Millions of men and women have given their lives and their best to this country, and they gave us the richest, strongest nation on earth. But since that time, we have become lazy and fat as a people. And we have allowed this shadow government to grow. And Eisenhower tried to warn us about it with the military-industrial complex, because I know you know that one.
Yep.
And then Kennedy got whacked in Dallas November 22nd, 1963. Then his brother, Robert Kennedy, got whacked. Sirhan, CIA mind control. Then Martin Luther King with James Earl Ray, the assassin. You fast forward up to the Murrah building, up to 9/11. Okay. Sandy Hook shooting, Las Vegas shootings, the fires that we talked about in California, but potentially made by the same beam-type weapons that Sequist saw with his own eyes. Oh, I said his name. Shit.
Hold on. Even though he said it, we went back and talked about it. He is not in any intelligence service. Therefore, there is no harm, no foul in that. So I just want to clarify that because I knew this part was going to come up, and I just wanted to make sure that there was no harm in it. He recalled that it was that person was named in his book, so everything's good. I'll get the recording going again.
God dang it. Well, that's a different one. So you see what I'm saying?
Uh-huh.
I shouldn't have said that name, but he's not operational anymore, and he's retired. So,
I actually made a note of that, and I was going to talk to you about that when this was done.
yeah. I've heard. I know a lot of stuff, and I have to monitor myself not to say stuff about the guys that are still working. So, anyway, Sequest saw those same beams in Nicaragua. They were testing that SDI stuff down there in the 80s. And then you fast forward to those fires in California,
Right.
and now it's operational.
Yeah, of course. They were working on it, trying to perfect it back then. But you know how long ago that's been, and how better the equipment is now. It's all perfected now.
Yeah. So there's a lot more stuff here. We haven't scratched the surface on the CI mind control stuff like the MK Ultra and the Project Slammer and the various things. So we'll save that for another time because that's a whole. I know a lot of stuff about all that. I was involved in that. I actually got killed in the hospital. I died in the hospital. I told you that story with some of that, but I know a lot of the science behind it. Microwave lasers. Creating resonance cavities and using psychotronic weapons. Psychotronic weapons are weapons that are electronic in nature, but they manipulate the psyche and the psychology of the target.
Really?
In other words, yeah, we might as well just do this. You can cut it up in pieces later, but they began experimenting with directed energy weapons, plasma beams, microwaves, lasers. We had built a new embassy in Moscow in the 80s, and the Russians are very smart. They set up covert microwave dishes to beam microwaves at our embassy over there. Now, these microwaves were modulated around the 840 megahertz frequency range, which is real close to the cell phone signal frequency.
Okay.
It's not by accident that they picked it that way.
Okay.
But the Soviets learned that if you modulate microwaves around the 840 megahertz range, that's the natural resonance frequency of the human cranium.
Oh.
So that when you set up a microwave blast modulated around that frequency, it sets up a resonance pattern inside the cranium, bouncing around. Now they used phase conjugation technology, which is a way to conjugate the wavelengths and certain things, and mix frequencies and create desired things. They found out that you could hit a person with a certain type of microwave, and it would make them sad, or it would make them angry, would make their stomach nauseous. Or another, tweak the frequency a little bit, and they get bad headaches.
This sounds like the lily wave theory.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, you know, you look at a hot dog in a microwave, you put it in there and you turn it on and you just watch it.
Right.
And let it cook. And don't open it, just keep cooking it. Just watch it over a period of time and it'll swell up and blow up and it'll burn and it'll pop. Well, that's what happens to the capillaries in your brain.
Exactly.
And so what happened was the Soviets were doing a covert field test of their psychotronic, electromagnetic, energy-directed weapons on our embassy. They had KGB agents posing, they were double agents, posing as our State Department personnel, and they were on the inside monitoring the effectiveness. So after all this, people started getting headaches. People got sick. Later on, our ambassador over there came back to the States, and I think he died of leukemia or some type of cancer-related thing. But the CIA, listen to this. The CIA had doubles inside the KGB over there. There's double agents playing both sides. So the CIA found out that the Soviets were running this microwave op on our embassy, and they didn't say anything to our guys because they wanted to muck the data from the Soviets.
Wow.
For our psychotronics programs. These are all offshoots of the MK Ultra, MK Ultra, and all those other things.
Wow.
Oh yeah. So they silently, the CIA sat there and let our own guys get bombed. I mean, if you look at an operational parameter, you know, what do you got to do? Sacrifice 200-300 people, and you get some valuable intelligence about the next generation of weapons.
Right.
So to them, it was an operational trade. You know, we sacrifice a few of our people. We don't warn them, so the Soviets won't get spooked and stop the microwaves. And then we're going to use our double agents to steal the data from the Russians. And that's what they did.
That is so funny that you bring that up because I just did a report last week about, I forget the name of the videos. It had something to do with like brainwashing people, TV and cell phones. But the very last part of the report was talking about the Lily wave. And it was developed by a guy. His last name was Lilly. And guess who came in and took over his studies? The CIA. Because he was able to generate a frequency that would make you happy, make you sad, or could make you completely pass out. And that was back in the late 50s. And it's used as a carrier wave inside radio and TV, primarily TV, but it's also can be generated through cell phones. Hence all these cell phone towers that are popping up like little chess pieces all over the cities everywhere. Could be used to transmit a Lily wave very easily. And because a lot of people are wondering, and even the people that build these cell towers are wondering, why are they plugging so much juice into these towers? It's like anywhere from 5 to 10 times the amount of power needed to power up one of these cell towers. That's how much power is going into these towers now. Way more than they need. So to me, it just solidifies that story even further now.
Yeah, it turns out, excuse me, it turns out that when the Murrah building was detonated on April 19th, 1995, the way I look at this, I turned down that job, but if I had have taken it, what you do when you do a bombing job like that is you have a cover or a series of patches or whatever to, you know, you got to misdirect everything. And, you know, I believe McVeigh wanted to bomb that building, and he got the Ryder truck and did the ammonium nitrate and all that stuff. But he was told to be there at a certain time. His handlers told him to be there like at 9 o'clock. and the thing went off at 9:03. They had already planted 3 separate bombs inside the Murrah building. And what it was going to do, they were going to have the Ryder truck go up there and detonate, and then they were going to detonate their planted explosives at the same time to cover up the fact that the building was pre-wired, and then blame it all on the Patsy McVeigh. But what happened was 2 of those bombs did not explode. If they'd hired somebody like me, if I'd have done that, I guarantee they'd all exploded. But whoever did that job was not professional, and so then a massive cover-up ensued. And, you know, there was that, the police officer down the street, Randy Yeekey.
Yeah.
He was given a ticket down on Northwest 5th Avenue in downtown Oklahoma City, on the day the Murrah building was blown up. He's given a traffic ticket to somebody.
Yeah,
and,
we'll talk about Randy Yeekey. That was a real fascinating story.
Yeah, that's in the book too. He had been in, the military, and had come back and got a job with the Oklahoma City Police Department. And April 19th, 95, the day that building went off, it was about 9:03 a.m. in the morning. Yeekey heard the explosion. He just left his car and everything and went running. He was the very first responder there. And he went in, and, you know, when the glass and everything was flying, there's a lot of people cut up, faces bleeding, you know, mayhem. And he rescued 4 people and saved their lives. Oklahoma City Police Department gave him the Meritorious Conduct Award for valor for saving civilians' lives. And then after he pulled those 4 people out, he went to the daycare center. He's looking for children that were hurt. And that's where he stumbled across the second unexploded bomb. And evidently, the people who planned that operation at the Murrah building, they wanted a bomb in the daycare center to increase civilian casualties of children so that it would have the maximum psychological effect on the American people. Now, terrorists, when they bomb a building, they want it as gruesome, as bad as they can to make everyone scared as they can. That's what they did. So he discovered that one, and there's supposed to be another one that was not detonated. And he had gotten pictures. He called his wife, Tanya. They just got back together. They were reconciling. And anyway, Yeekey knew that there was something real fishy with the cover story, like McVeigh was a lone bomber. And he started gathering evidence himself, and he knew a lot of people in the Oklahoma City area, and he talked to them, he talked to people. A lot of people said, I'm not saying nothing. Don't use my name. I don't want to talk. I don't want nothing to do with it. I got a wife and kids, you know. And so anyway, he collected a bunch of files and started his own investigation. And he started talking to some of the cops about it, and they told him to lay off, you know, and shut up. Then the FBI offered him a big job in Dallas, out of the Dallas Field Division there, cush job, you know, to just like shut him up. And he was a patriot, and he kept pursuing the thing. And they made copies. They had a bunch of files, and he made copies. They put one copy down in I think it was the First National Bank building downtown Oklahoma City, near the Murrah building. And then his friend was an investigator, and he got a copy of them. And so the pressure was mounting on Yeekey to keep shutting up. And the more he dug, the more he found. And the more he found, the more he wanted to blow the whistle. And so they finally just pulled him in there and ordered him to shut up, or they were going to fire him. And so he got spooked, and he took the files in his patrol car, and he went up by Kingfisher, Oklahoma. He used to have lunch at a diner there. And he told the guys there, he said, you know, I'm moving a bunch of files. I'm kind of nervous. And he was going to put them in a storage room. Well, that's the last time anyone ever saw him alive. And so what happened was there was a little state correctional facility up there around Kingfisher, Oklahoma, and it was regularly patrolled by civilian police officers. And one of the cops that was driving around the prison looked over there and saw Yeekey's car with the trunk open and the doors open. And he went over there and checked it, and there's blood everywhere. It's a mess. And he immediately called it in on the radio. All points bulleted. 50 some odd, I don't know, I think it's 54 police officers, you know, state State Highway Patrol, Oklahoma Bureau of Investigation, Kingfisher County, Kingfisher City, all kinds of police officers, when they heard the call that a cop had been shot and blood and everything, they all ran and dropped what they were doing. And they found Randy Egan's body off in a field by the car, and he had lacerations, all the cuts, all over him, like with a knife. And he had contusions, like he'd been beaten with a sap glove or a blackjack or something, or a pipe or a baseball bat. And then he was shot right in the back of the head. And he was laying face down in the field, and his service revolver, his pistol was gone. So all those cops, 50-some-odd cops, spent about an hour, and they were all walking on foot, combing the body around, looking, trying to find the gun. And they couldn't find it. And then the FBI sent a black helicopter out of the Oklahoma City office, and it had like 3 agents in it, I think it was. And they got out, and within 5 minutes, they told the cops, "We'll take it from here. It's a federal thing." And within 5 minutes, they found the murder weapon. So that was a really strange thing. And then, meanwhile, it had went out over the wire, and the police department had confirmed the death, and so they called Tanya Yiki, his reconciled wife, and told her, your husband's been found dead. So she immediately went down to the First National Bank building there and got the safety deposit key so she could get those other records, because the records were gone. There was nothing in the trunk of that patrol car. Whoever killed Randy Yiki and tortured him took those records, all the stuff he'd been collecting about the cover-up of the Murrah building. Okay? So she went down to the bank building, and she said, "I want these files." And they said, "No, you can't. The FBI was just here 30 minutes ago," and they took them and sealed them under national security. So she went back home, and someone had broken her house and wrote stuff on her wall. I think it was, let's see, "You're next," or something like that. So she went to stay with her sister. And then she'd had her vehicle in the shop, had some brake work done on it, and a little while later she was driving and her brakes failed. And so, this is part of the cover-up. This is part of how the shadow government, first they bribe him with a cush job at the FBI, then he won't play, he's a patriot, he wants the truth out, and then they hammer him. And that's their standard procedure, and it's like a broken record.
What about the third set of copies that were...
Oh, yeah, he had given them to a friend of his. I have his name in the book. I can't remember. But he had a little Cessna, a single-engine plane. I think it was a 172. And he had got spooked. And he was going to take those records and hide them in a storeroom. They put the other ones in the safety deposit box, and the next set of records, he was going to take them and fly them somewhere and hide them. And his plane crashed on the same day they found Randy Egan's body with a bullet in the back of his head. These people murdered an Oklahoma City police officer, and they murdered a veteran of the United States military who served his country. This is the shadow government. They are a disease. They are a cancer. The CIA needs to be cleaned out. The NSA needs to be cleaned out. The Defense Intelligence Agency needs to be cleaned out. The Pentagon needs a thorough cleaning too. The question is, what do you do when you put the goats in charge of guarding the garbage can? I mean, we have all these guys and all these high level and all this big budgets and all this stuff, and they're supposed to be protecting national security. They're destroying national security. They're supposed to uphold the Constitution. They're destroying it. The people who are in charge of protecting our citizens and protecting our Constitution, protecting our rights, are systematically going up against it to destroy it. Now, not all of them. There's some good people in the DI. I know I worked with Captain Wilson. He was a stand-up guy, bro. I know I've worked with people in the agency. I've known a couple of NSA guys. I've liaisoned with several different types of people. But there are good, like you said, there's white hats and black hats.
Right.
And this is a fight between light and dark. So, I'm hoping to illuminate, some of the things that I've seen. One more thing I'd like to add, when, Timothy McVeigh supposedly blew up the Murrah building, he was a patsy. There was a team ordered to go down to Oklahoma City in the wake of the aftermath and all the emotional trouble and turmoil and all the stuff. And it was a team to assess the psychological damage and help. And one of the guys that was on the team was Dr. Julian West. He was one of the CIA's MK Ultra guys. And he was in charge of the investigation of determining the psychological fallout from the Murrah building.
Oh, wow.
You betcha, buddy. I mean, I've got stuff in this book that is really good stuff. I'm not just saying it's a sell book. Because, see, I wanted to investigate this stuff myself. When I saw all this dirty stuff for myself, and then they threw me in prison and planted me, and, I mean, my head was spinning. I had no idea that this had all went so far. I didn't know that they were rigging the jury wheels. I didn't know that they were, the judges were in pedophile rings or sex rings. I mean, I just didn't know the depth of how far it went.
Right.
And the average American civilian that's working a job and has their family and doing whatever they're doing, they do not understand the level that we're talking about here. And so what we're trying to do is just some way, I'm begging people. I can't do this alone. Scott, you can't do it alone. William Binney, Edward Snowden, the whistleblowers can't do it alone. We have to get together. We have to bring forth each little piece of the puzzle, and we have to spread the truth, and we have to wake people up on a mass scale. And if we don't wake up on a mass scale, there's no way we are going to be able to defeat this New World Order and this shadow government that's sucking the life out of our country.
I agree.
It's like a tumor cell. It's like, and it's growing and growing. It's sucking all the energy and sucking all the good stuff. And so I don't know what to do except do my little part here and just speak the truth as I know it. I don't care what anybody thinks about it. I don't care what you think about it. I don't care what anybody thinks about it. I know what I saw, and I was afraid. I was a coward for 20 some odd years. I had seen what they'd done in the field. I'd seen people killed. I'd seen people blown up. I'd seen them renditioned and tortured and cut up. And I know what they do. I've seen them run up with chemicals from the chemical interrogation unit. I know what they do. And I was a coward. I was too afraid to do what I'm doing now. But if it costs your life, it costs your life. But the truth is going to come out. And if I die or something happens to me, someone else will pick up the tab. There's other people out there. I beg you guys, I beg you operators that were at the Murrah building. I know there's some of you out there. I know you guys that were at the 9/11 inside WCT-7. I know you guys that were planting the explosives. You're out there. Step forward. Don't carry this burden of guilt to the grave. Bring the light. Bring the truth. Admit, you were a criminal like I was. Admit that you were doing black ops. Admit that you had lost your way with greed. And I liked all that good money, and I had Mercedes, I had Cadillac limousines, I had all kinds of stuff. But what good is it if you don't have your soul?
Yeah, that's true.
And what good is it if you sell out your country? This is our country. We live here.
That's right. That's probably the most powerful thing you said right there, is getting to call these other people out and wake them up, because the greed money will, they say money can't buy you happiness, but you just don't know where to shop. But that's not the important part, is when you sell your soul out. That's where you are totally not even with mankind anymore.
Yes. And so, money is one thing, but all this stuff is something else. And I made my choice. Okay. And I'm getting towards the end of my life anyway. I'm 61 years old, and I'm 100% totally permanently disabled with severe PTSD. That's what it says on the medical files. I used to wake up kicking and screaming with the bad dreams and the sweats and all the stuff. And I've used spiritual things, and I used to be, when we get back stateside, I was drunk. I would get shit-faced drunk. I'd get straight whiskey till the room spun and blot out all the shit. And then when we got operational to go out again, I'd sober up and clean up. And I hid my PTSD. I hid my bad dreams. Our principals higher up said, "How you doing? You doing okay?" I said, "Yes, sir, everything's fine. Where do we go?" Because I wanted the money. I was greedy for the money.
Right.
And so, yeah. So now I'm coming clean, but I quit drinking. I drank so bad I had 30% cirrhosis of the liver. And my doctor said, "You're going to die in 5 years if you don't quit drinking." So I went cold turkey. I quit. This is all right around the time of the Murrah building back in '94 in October when I turned that down. I walked away from $1 million in cash. I walked away from a lot of other jobs besides that the CIA operatives are not the only people we were working for. I worked for some other people too, but that's beyond the scope of this discussion.
Yeah.
However, I walked away from the money and I walked away from the alcohol, and I went cold turkey, and I haven't had a drop since. And now I'm completely healed. My doctor told me I've healed my cirrhosis of the liver. So all our veterans out there, all you guys that were in Iraq, and all you guys that were in Afghanistan, all of our brothers in Vietnam, suffering from Agent Orange and liver failure, and all of our women. I know stories of women that were over in Iraq, and they would go out to the latrines in the barracks at night, and they'd get raped. And so they start peeing in their Kevlar helmets so they wouldn't have to go out there. And there's a lot of rape of our women inside the U.S. military, and they cover it up. It's another big cover-up, like the Gulf War syndrome. So all you women out there that serve our country, my hat goes off to you. All the firefighters at the Murrah building, the men who went in, all that, the men who went in up in New York and breathed out asbestos.
Right.
And all of our good American people, police officers, agents, the good people that make our country work. To all of y'all, I salute you. And to all of the shadow government people, the black ops guys like I used to be, that are ate up with your greed and your murder and your assassinations and all your power trips, your time is ending. It is over. And we will stand up against you. We will stand up against the evil and the darkness. We have a constitution in our country for a reason. There's a reason why they wrote it that way. And it's time we started enforcing it.
Agreed.
So anyway, I'm glad we're not live, dude, because I'm like, fuck, you're going off, bro. You can cut out whatever you edit, Scott. You just, I'm rambling here, and I appreciate the deal. So you just flow. I don't know what you want to do, bro. You might want to.
I'm going to leave the whole, now, I mean, you want to go ahead and close this out? Because I want to talk to you a little bit off, recording.
Yeah. And look, this mind control stuff, I know a whole shitload about it, but we just don't have time. It's another 2-3 hours.
Yeah, and shit, it's already 11:30 here almost, and
holy shit, I didn't even realize it, bro.
Yeah, no, that's okay. We got almost 2 hours of content right now.
Yeah, so what you could do, if you wanted, you put it in little 30-minute things, and then put it out, or however you want to do it, you do it, bro.
Yeah, I think like I say, I just want to get clarification on one or two things, but as far as I'm concerned, the whole thing can go out just as is.
Okay. What do you got? What is it?
Well, let's go ahead and end the recording. So, what's the last thing that you want to say to people tonight, and so we can go ahead and close this recording out?
Well, I mean, when you asked me that, I just got the chills down my back, and I am getting a little teary-eyed. What I'd like to say, we are Americans. This is our country. Our children will be raised here. Our grandchildren. What are we going to be handing down to them?
Amen.
Are we going to accept the fact that Kennedy's head can go forward and back, and that 25 years later the CIA will make another request to hold the documents? Why can't we see the documents from our president? Why can't we see a lot of the stuff from the Murrah building? Why can't we see the stuff on 9/11? Why do we have to have all this secrecy? We have, as a people, to unite together. We must put our individual differences aside, black, white. Some of the best guys I knew, most stand-up guys I knew, were black guys. I'm part Indian and part white. There was interracial guys, there was white guys, and there were assholes in every group. So we can't play this racist stuff. We have to come together. Do we want to save our country or not? Do you want your children microchipped like a dog or not? Do you believe in freedom or not? Do you believe in freedom enough to give your life? Will you stand up with us? Will you stand up now with our veterans and our firefighters that go in terrible, horrible places and risk their lives every day to help protect us? Will you stand up as one people? That's what we have to do to defeat this great evil that's permeating our country. And so I pray for Donald Trump, and I pray for Jeb Sessions. I pray for the good people in the CIA. I pray for the good people in the NSA. Okay? And all the rest of them. But we are going to fight the dirt. We're going to fight the filth. We're going to fight the evil. We don't care where you work. We don't care who you are. We are going to unite together and take our country back. And I truly believe that if we can get together, we can bring the light back to America's soul. America has gotten sick. It is not the country. My dad, when he got back from Pearl Harbor, I was talking to him one day, and that satanic liar, Bill Clinton, was on TV, and I was sitting around. My dad was still alive. And he reached up with the remote control and turned the TV off, and he says, that man's a criminal, and he's a disgrace to the office of the presidency. He said, I didn't go through all that shit in Pearl Harbor, and at Guadalcanal, they took so many casualties. There were so many people blown apart, killed, malaria fever, horrible suffering our guys went through. He said, I didn't go through all that. So some lying little politician like that, he said, he's not my president. And so our country was changed back then in World War II, and now the shadow government has creeped in while we were all sleeping, and now look at what we got right now. Look at it. And it's getting worse and worse. Edward Snowden told the truth about the NSA. And look, he has to run like a little criminal. Go hide in Moscow. Look at me. I told him I didn't want to bother the Murrah. They throw me in jail. So this whole thing is backwards. It's upside down. And we need to get together to think. I'd like to thank you, Scott, for getting your channel out. Alex Jones down there in Austin. There's a lot of George and Ori, coast to coast. There's a lot of guys out here, that have been trying. They have to toe the line. You can't just. Very few people are going to talk like me and go right out in the open. because they're afraid of being killed or set up or losing their jobs or whatever. But everyone has to do their part, and we all got to stand together. So that's what I got to say. If I have to give my life for this, and I mean it, if they send somebody to me, I'm not just going to lay down. I'm not going to be arrested again ever.
Yeah.
So I'm just saying that. I'm not saying anything else. I will not. When policemen break the law, then there isn't any law. It's just a struggle. It's just a struggle for survival.
That's the truth right there. And that's a lot of what we do before I even met you, because I was into dealing with public corruption. And even though we like to say there are some good cops out there, there's more bad cops out there than there are good cops. And here's the thing. When the good cops do nothing, they are complicit by omission.
Exactly, Scott. And I forgot to say one thing. When Randy Yeeke, that Oklahoma City police officer, one reason they didn't investigate his murder much, and the Oklahoma City Police Department shut up and played along with the federal cover-up of the Murrah building, was because the FBI had secretly infiltrated the Oklahoma City Police Department prior to the Murrah City bombing, the Murrah building bombing, and they had gotten tapes and all kinds of stuff. The Oklahoma City Police, some of them were dealing drugs in there.
Yeah.
And so what the feds did was they had the evidence, and they went to the chief of police and all and said, look, we need your help covering up and controlling this bombing thing of the Murrah building. So if you'll play along with us, okay, then we'll make sure nobody gets indicted. And if you start fighting it on us, and this Randy Yeeke guy starts coming up and blowing the whistle and showing his files and tell everyone what really happened because he was the first one there and saw it with his own eyes, then we're going to indict you guys and take y'all down too. And that is how they control. And that goes right back to what you said about the dirty cops. A lot of the Oklahoma City guys in there are good guys. But some of the cops were in there dealing dope.
But it goes back to what I was saying. If they do nothing, they're complicit by omission.
You're exactly right, brother.
So it doesn't matter how good they really are because they allowed it to happen.
Yes, and one more thing. I was on a hard line this time, not a radio phone, and I hope that the audio signal is better. But if it is tampered with and you get a weird thing on your end, guess what, buddy?
It's
probably them.
Yep, it's definitely them, because when you're telling the truth, they're going to try to scramble your signal. Now, one thing, you know how many hits I told you your video had before we started? Well, it's at 5,986. It's fixing to crack 6,000 views before tonight's over.
What? We did that has it been 1 day or 2 days?
It was on the 28th. Today's the 29th.
Holy shit. See, I've been so busy, with all this stuff that I'm kind of losing track. I don't know if it's Monday or Wednesday half the time, but I've got my mind focused on all this big stuff, and I'm trying to remember dates and times and stuff over 10, 20, 30 years, and I hope I'm not scatterbrained too much. I hope I'm not talking too fast and making myself where you can't understand me.
No, it's coming through clear. In fact, I just refreshed the screen. It's at 5990 now. And I just refreshed it just right before I told you. This thing is popping off some hits. It's going to go big. Give it a couple more days, and it starts getting out there on suggested channels and stuff like that. More people start posting it around. That's a good video. So when I get this one up and out, it's going to be a biggie.
How do you think, I've been yapping and everything, but what kind of format you think you're going to do? You're going to put it all in one big long one? See, because what I found is when people watch YouTube videos, if you keep them down around 15, 20 minutes, their attention span, it's hard to follow this stuff in one big chunk because it's high-level stuff, and pretty soon they reach the CDT. It's the cognitive dissonance threshold. That's the point where your mind blanks out when there's too much stuff coming in it, and it kind of shuts down. It's a natural self-protective mechanism. And so you may want to think about just doing 30 minutes or 45 minutes and then breaking it up, or I don't know what you want to do. I'm not here to tell you that, but I don't know. It's just so much stuff. It took me 20, 30 years of living all this, and I'm trying to condense it down into a couple, 3 hours,
Oh, I know. That's why we're going to have to go through this several times because it ekes out more information that you compartmentalize. The stuff that you're able to talk about, But now, I think some of the better shows that are coming out on YouTube now are about 2-hour shows, and it's starting to show because more people are turning off the TV now. And they would rather sit and listen to something like this because this just blows their fucking mind out.
Yeah. And the weird part about it is, this stuff, I am speaking the absolute pure truth as I know it, as I saw it. Now, I'm not perfect. I misjudge things. I missee things. But I was in federal prison for 2.5 years for something I didn't do. I had to overcome my anger. I was really mad at, you ask someone, how would you like to get planted with fake evidence and sit in a joint for 2.5 years? It's not fun.
Right.
It sucks. I never want to go to prison. It sucks. But, that's what they did to me. That's what I saw while I was in there. And no one gets to see it unless you're in there. And then the people that do see it and they're in there, once they get out of there, they say, I never want to go back, so I'm not saying shit to nobody.
Right.
Because if I start talking about all the stuff they do in there, they might plant me and throw me back in there. So there's an impetus for people to shut up, get it out of you, put it behind you, put it in your rear view. I'm bringing it forward so people will understand the truth about their country.
Right.
And how bad we've been lied to.
That's it. That's absolutely it right there. So, I'm going to go ahead and cut this recording off. And
okay.
If y'all's job now is to get this video out on all your social media platforms. Give it a thumbs up, pound the thumbs up button. That's going to help raise its rating so it can get out further to other people. Share this with everybody. Make sure you do your job. Cody has done everything he can to get you the information. It's your job to start sharing it with all your friends. Wake everybody up. His last video is picking up a lot of traction. When this video gets up, it's going to do the same. So I want y'all to do y'all's part and help make America great again. Help make this country great again and put the pride back into the people to clean out this fucking corrupt, satanic government that we all know is among us. With that said, y'all have a good night. God bless. Snafu out.
Now, that was our recording for last night's. And so now, so let me kill that. So tomorrow I'm going to post the next video because we already did the recording this morning. In the morning, I'm going to call him back up, and we're going to also cut another probably about a 2-hour show. If y'all think 2 hours is too much, we'll just stop it, go take a pee, go do whatever, go eat, come back and turn it back on. But I don't want to stop it, and I don't want to chop it up because it breaks the flow of everything, and the flow is real critical to keep the timelines in a progressive order. So, with that said, I want y'all to tune in. I want y'all to tell everybody to sub to the channel, hit the thumbs up button, because what that does is it drives the video counts way up. Because this video that I did with him yesterday, when we were talking about it at the view count it was then, it's at 8,836 views right now. I just checked. So it is definitely clicking off. Here's the thing though. Even if you only watch the video for 10 or 15 minutes and you got to go and do something, by you clicking on it, liking it, and sharing it with other people, it's going to put it into the suggested videos column. That means that other people that you don't know in other parts of the world will, or even in the States, will see that in just the suggested videos and click on it, because I'm putting together some pretty good thumbnails to really capture people's attention. The thumbnail for this one is going to be CodySnodgres the SnowdenEffect. The reason I want to dub it the Snowden effect is to start calling out all the other white hats in the government to come forward with information, and all the black hats in the government to turn over into white hats and start coming out with their information too. We have to start giving everybody support. We have to start blasting this out so that the mainstream media cannot ignore it. And it doesn't matter, because by the time the mainstream media reports it, y'all will be light years ahead of them. And besides, who watches TV anyway? I hope you don't, because it's brainwashing you. And I did a video about it. Y'all can go check it out. I got a lot of videos on my channel, but I did one specifically for how to beat brainwashing. And then next thing you know, I start getting his information that collaborates with the information I've already found. So I want y'all to have a good evening. I'm going to go ahead and cut this loose now. And God bless. Good night. Snafu out.